Bonjour everyone, I am Anne-Lise Cailliez and welcome to Parlez-Vous CEO, where we ditch the corporate talk and get real about entrepreneurship. Each week, I chat with founders and CEOs who build businesses their way, through the failures, pivots, and breakthroughs. And they bring the fire. Plus, I'll drop some golden nuggets of wisdom from my own entrepreneurial journey. This is your space to grow, learn, and evolve with a true growth mindset. Remember, success isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Now let's kick things off and get this party started. Hello, bonjour, hello. Welcome to another episode of Parlez-Vous CEO. I'm Anne-Lise Cailliez and I am your host. And I am super excited today to have with me Adrien Dubourg. Adrien, in your own words, would you share with our listeners a bit about your story and your background?
Sure. Bonjour. Hi, everybody. My name is Adrien Dubourg. I'm originally from the south of France, a small town called Pau. I live in Dallas, Texas. I've been here in the U.S. for 15 years. I've been married for almost 20 years to a beautiful wife called Magali. She's from Marseille, and we have two beautiful boys. And I'm the CEO of a company called Capital Boutiq, investors in commercial real estate.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Adrien. And so you left France to build a career in Canada in the pharma and then the consulting industry. And then you joined a big four firm in New York to do M&A advisory. So you could have had a very comfortable life. What was the pull that made you leave? And when you arrived in the US, did any part of you think that one day you go back to France or Canada?
I have a really good, comfortable life today. But yeah, it's different than the corporate, predictable paycheck life. I'm now an entrepreneur and, I have to make payroll. I have to take care of people and business. And right now, especially in the real estate, it's pretty tough and challenging. But I finished school. I always wanted to live overseas, whether it was Australia or UK or Canada. And, we had the opportunity, my wife and I, so she's French. We met actually in Sydney in Australia. We were 22 years old. We were doing an internship and then we came back, finished school. But at that time we knew we wanted to go and have a different life, speak a different language. So she found an opportunity. We got married, moved to Canada, Toronto, for 5 years, worked there, worked for a big pharmaceutical company, was in sales. Then I moved to corporate finance. And then came the question of, do we go back to France or do we continue, something else? And we actually applied for, I remember, the Canadian citizenship. We were maybe thinking staying in Canada for a little bit longer. But at the same time, we also had a job opportunity to move to the US as an expatriate on a 3-year contract. So we actually decided to follow both jobs. So she got promoted with a French engineer company, and I was promoted with my big pharma company. So we were on 2 different visa, which you will understand play a part later on. But we were both on a different immigration path, both expatriate within Dallas, Texas. So we moved at the same time, got a house, and we were supposed to be here for 3 years. But eventually, she had a baby and, she enrolled to do her executive MBA. I was also trying to pursue a career outside the big pharma. So I started to do venture capital. I started to invest and kind of form this entrepreneurship mindset. And so, when the period of 3 years expired, we were on a pretty tough road because we were, on a green card. We didn't know how long we could stay in the US. We didn't actually get the Canadian citizenship because we didn't eventually qualify since we left the country. And we had to make a pretty hard decision, are we staying in the US or are we coming back to France? And at the time, we decided, let's pursue the career, let's continue to work here. And we were fortunate enough where my wife had her company sponsoring her on another working extension visa, which eventually allowed us to stay in the country. So it's been a long journey because we only became American citizens in 2022. So we lived about 10 years plus in the US, every time having to renew our paperwork to be able to stay. And it's challenging, but it was worth it.
Absolutely. I hear you. And I'm very familiar with anything visa related. I've been in the US for 20 years and I think I've done all types of visa. And it is a challenge when you're building a career to have that floating above your head, right? Always this situation of there is a limited time frame. And especially if you're two foreigners, that adds a layer of complexity. And I want to go back to where you and Magali met. So you were two French people meeting in Australia. So both of you had left France independently. And so what does it take to build a life with someone when neither of you is clearly playing safe?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and it's kind of funny because I'm only 42, but I feel I'm like already old in the sense of I never did like online dating and all of those apps like Tinder and, whatever to find my soulmate. I guess we got really lucky, and we were probably very naive too. Like I had no idea what it was to be a husband and let alone a father, and today a business partner, because we've been working together for 8+ years running this company. So when I look back and I see some of those pictures, I tell myself I had no clue. And the both of us actually, because it wasn't clearly in the cards, at 22 to meet my soulmate and get married and build a life together. But it's been an incredible experience. I think what happened is we were both finishing our school in Toulouse. So I was in the École de Commerce, finishing up my master degree. And then Magali she completed Super-Héros, and she was also finishing. So she's an engineer from École d'ingénieurs de Grenoble. And then she did Super-Héros, donc Aéronautique de Toulouse. And we were finishing our degree. So in Australia, it was just technically, I guess, a dating exercise. Like we were, boyfriend and girlfriend. But we started to have conversations about what we wanted to do in life, what was important to us, what kind of career do we want to have. And when we came back and finished school, we were both applying for different jobs right after being graduate. So I started to work for a French bank in the south of France. She picked up a job in Paris, and we were both continuing to kind of date each other, but we never lived together. So I was going to Paris. She was coming down on the weekend, taking the train up and down. And then we were sending resume to Singapore and Canada and all over, the world, saying, okay, well, maybe one day we'll pick up a job somewhere. And long story short, basically, she came home and she was like, yeah, I have this opportunity to go to Canada. And a few days later, I proposed to her. I said, look, why don't we get married? That way you'll actually make things easier, because technically I'll be your husband. We're going to have to go through the immigration process and everything. And when you look at the list of requirements, if I had to follow her without being her husband, you have to prove that you've been living together, you have bank accounts, all of those things. And I told her, I'm like, my life is going to be so complicated if I don't marry you. So I'd rather marry you, and it'll be much easier. But we were already in love, and we were young, and, we got married. And within a few weeks, we basically had our paperwork, and then we left the country. Our parents thought, oh, they're going to be back in a couple of months. Like, there's no way this is going to work out. Like you guys barely know each other. You never live together. You're going overseas. I left my job in the bank. I had no job in Canada. Mm-hmm. Like, it was a big gamble, and we left. We never came back.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is amazing. That's really proper cowboy. I mean, I love everything that I'm hearing. I love the, meeting a girl that you like, getting married, getting brought together. I love it. Very, very romantic. And so, Adrien, so you were in big pharma, EPA, and in M&A consulting with Fortune 500 companies, right? And then commercial real estate in Dallas. What's the thread that you were following even before you knew that it was where it was leading?
Yeah, it's a really good question. When I look back at my career and the decisions that I made, I think there's really two components. One is, I would call it capital, and one is more like people. On the capital side, I wanted to be a financial analyst. I wanted to be a CFA. I actually sit down for the CFA part 1. And then when I worked in Canada, in Toronto, Toronto is like New York, without the American, I guess. It's the Canadian version of New York, but you have the stock exchange. It's a big city. There's a lot of banks. And I kind of wanted to be part of it. But, you remember back 2008, 2009, the great financial crisis. People were getting laid off. And so at the time, I was like, well, I got to get into the industry. I cannot just be on the capital side, being a financial analyst or work in a bank. So that's when I started to work for Big Pharma, and I got to know more the corporate, behind the scene, the product, the supply chain, the marketing, like all of the different functions. And basically what happened is when I got transferred over here in the US, I wanted to be more of a technician. So I got my CMA license, then I got my CPA, which is Certified in Management Accounting, Certified Public Accounting. And I really wanted to understand the technicality of behind the scene, all the corporate finance, the reporting, acquisition, merger, so on and so forth. And that led me into consulting because at the time, I was able to understand the industry, but also understand systems. We were implementing different accounting systems like SAP or Oracle or some of those ERP systems. And I wanted to go into consulting because I wanted to explore other industries. So I ended up working with large organizations in the banking sector, automotive, telecommunication, financial services. And then I ended up working with a big CPA firm in New York to do merger and acquisition. So basically, when a company want to buy a company or sell a company, they're bringing, first what's called the valuation team. They do quality of earnings, due diligence, audit, and then they bring people like me that kind of understand the system, the capital, the structure, because those companies, you have private equity behind them, you have investors, but also understand the people, like the component of capabilities, services, because when it comes down to, bringing companies together, you always have to take care of people. You have to make job offers, you have to move people from different job sites, and all of this is integrated. So I wanted to understand everything around a transaction from a capital perspective, get a couple of exposure with different industries, but I also wanted to get into operations. And really what I found out is when I did a couple of those transactions, there were always some key people in the room. You had transactional attorney, private equity, consultants, and then really the CEO or, the executive suite. But what I found out is the people that were really, rewarded during the process were really the people on the private equity side. And so I got to know a couple of groups. And what I also find out is there were heavy investors in companies, but there were also heavy investors in real estate. And at the time, my wife separately, she was pursuing her career in aerospace, but she started through her MBA getting involved in real estate investments with some other friends. And we both realized, well, real estate is pretty stable. It's long-term. You can create some wealth. It's got some transactional component, but it's also heavy in operations. And so we were decided hey, why don't we work together? I bring the capital, you bring the operation, you're an engineer, you understand, how everything works. And eventually we build a company and work together. And that's how we started to slowly kind of bring both career paths. She made the jump first and went all out into investing in real estate. I continue for a couple of years to do kind of consulting, helping her raising capital and eventually putting those deals together. And then eventually we both decided, okay, now it's the time to go. And that was back in 2018, 2019, where we made the jump to decide and said, okay, let's just go all in and let's both do this full time.
And what did that feel like to go from corporate to going all in on real estate? And what did people think on you?
So I wanted to be an entrepreneur my whole life. I wanted to be independent. I didn't want to have to ask for somebody for a vacation, a bonus, a promotion. And I've had a hard time, personally with politics, and I've worked under different leadership. And as I started to navigate through consulting, you're never really part of the company because you see it from the outside. And so you navigate with the CFO and the CEO and the CMO and the CIO and all the C something O, and you understand all the different players and the job security and the challenges in the communication and whether you're public or private, what you can say, what you cannot say. And navigating those waters, I realized, well, I don't really want to be any of this. And I've seen some pretty tough things. I've seen people being laid off. I've seen some mass company restructuring. I've seen people literally losing their job and having to be escorted, and I've seen people being challenged with, losing their 401k and thinking they would retire. Eventually, they would have to go back to work. And also personally, we've been in situations with my wife where, there's been instances where the company may not renew the visa. And I had to negotiate with the HR, and you have kids at home and you don't know where you're going to be tomorrow. And if the company is going to sponsor you or eventually is going to help you out. And so I told my wife, I made the promise one day, I said, I'm never going to put our family in a situation where literally my whole future is going to depend on HR. I can't just go and cry and tell somebody, hey, you have to renew my visa. I don't want to leave the country. And I've seen it happening. I've seen people being expatriate, and overnight having to go back to Paris because they've lost their job or their visa expired. And so being an entrepreneur has always been on my mind. It's just I didn't know when and how. And I think eventually I had to trust myself and make the jump. The hardest part was to, one, be uncomfortable with the unknown, two, trusting myself, understanding that I will never have it all figured out, but eventually people will help you and open some doors. And three, it's also understanding I wasn't doing this by myself. Like it was a decision my wife and I made together. And it was like, no matter what, we've already left France, we've left Canada, we're working together, we're raising a family. I supported her during her MBA. She's been supporting me. We were already in this mindset, like nothing else can be worse than any of this, like trying to build a company, we're going to be fine. So that's how we kind of, made the jump. But, in hindsight, I think there's a lot of people that I'm seeing trying to pursue a career and they're very unhappy. But, eventually they have to pay a mortgage, they have a credit card, they have this, they have that, and they can't really go on their own. But you realize there's a lot of people with a lot of potential. And I think technology now with AI is disrupting all of this. But I think some people are more entrepreneurial than they think. It's just they have to be sometimes a little bit against the wall to start to make those decisions and trust themselves. But everybody's capable to start a business or a company, grab a couple of clients, and eventually make a living.
Is your own experience with entrepreneurship and how you started, is that why you're writing a book called The Intentional Entrepreneur?
Yes, I'm working on a book right now. I hope I'm going to publish this sometime soon later. That was something that got on my heart last year. I wanted to put something out there for my kids. Basically, for Father's Day, I was like, hey, if tomorrow something happens to me, what are my kids going to have? And I would like them to have a book with some of those lessons and, all of the things that I've been through. My journey as an entrepreneur has not been easy. I've been facing challenges. I had to make some hard decisions. I've been in situations where literally I was even thinking, do I have to go back and look for a job because some of our investments didn't turn out the way we wanted. It's been a lot of trial and error and also testing of my faith. And also testing of our marriage. There's been situations I was traveling, I was exhausted. My wife was also frustrated. We had the kids at home, nobody to kind of help us out. And, there's been situations we were like, is this really the life we want to have? But, I'm putting this book together because what I realized over the years is everything pays out if you are intentional about it, and I had an approach that was pretty selfish and career oriented and ego driven and transactional. And I thought, hey, I'm going to go into real estate and I'm going to be wealthy and it's a quick path to becoming rich. And the reality is I learned a lot about myself, my character, my resilience. And what I found is the intentionality of relationship, intentionality of the decisions you make, the people you hire, everything you do matters. And that's why I'm working on this book. And my goal, the next coming years is to try to educate people, helping them with like this kind of self-confidence, self-discipline, understanding kind of like the playbook. There's a lot of books out there on how to be successful in real estate or how to be an entrepreneur or all of those things. But I think when you bring it down to like very specific principles, there's some things that are very important. And for me, it's more so to teach this to my kids. I want them to learn those things because those are not the things you learn in a business school or out there. Like there are things that you learn through life and through experience.
If you had 3 tips to share with our listeners today on how to build confidence, what would they be?
It's a good question. I think, one of the things, and without becoming too spiritual or I guess religious, and I respect everybody's faith and I'm not thinking like I have the answer or anything, but one of the things that really helped me in the downtime and when I was doubting and feeling kind of like the world was against me, it was really anchoring myself in the scripture, reading the Bible, understanding the character of Jesus Christ, because we both grew up in France and France, appetite for religion or spirituality is different. Catholicism is very preponderant. And the way we go to church and the way community works and all of that is very different than here in the US. But here, the church is different. The community is different. And when I was facing trials and really challenges, I was able to get people around me to talk through what I was trying to process in my head. And those community groups, an accountability circle, people that really genuinely care about you. Even our marriage, we went to marriage counseling because we had challenges with communication. There were things my wife didn't understand. There were things I didn't understand. And really, it helps us out to kind of navigate. But answering your question, for our audience, it's a personal, intimate relationship, I guess, with the divine, but having faith in yourself and in what you do, not second guessing and not overthinking. But self-confidence comes really with courage, knowing who you are and what you're capable of. And then ultimately is the condition of the heart. If your intent is good and you really care and you want to do the right thing, you're going to be punched in the face a couple of times, but nothing is really going to get through because you have purpose. When I told myself, I'm going to be successful every single day, I wake up in the morning, I have a wife, I have 2 boys, I have so many things to be thankful for. It gives you self-confidence. It gives you the purpose to go out there and fight and work hard and keep the right heart and the right attitude. And I think, a lot of people are self-doubting, they're anxious, they're unhappy, they're bitter, they're angry. And I think it's not the right attitude in the marketplace, because that will get you to a place of, trouble. And social media doesn't help neither. The division out there, people getting every single day bombarded by different things. It doesn't really help you to be anchored in a place of peace. And that's what I'm trying to do when I'm building self-confidence. I think it starts with getting in peace with yourself, with where you are in life, with your ambitions, with your successes and your failures, and be okay with it.
I love that. Self-acceptance and also practicing gratitude is so important. I think even more so as an entrepreneur to navigate the ups and downs. And Adrien, I want to talk about your business now. So you run Capital Boutiq. I love how it's written boutique with just a Q. So it's a fully integrated multifamily investment platform with construction, asset management, property management, brokerage, and investor relations. So several different entities and now a new nonprofit focused on affordable housing. What's the one idea that connects all of it?
Yeah, we started with the asset management, and our goal was to invest capital and buy those projects and then contract out the third party to construction and property management. But what I had in my mind in terms of what works on the paper with consultants, that doesn't really work in reality. And, as you start to make investments, you realize you need to own the operations. You need to control the operations. Because ultimately, whether it's real estate, apartments, or industrial, or, offices or retail, who ultimately are your customers? My customers are my investors, who I take some of the capital that I report to, but ultimately they're our residents. People are coming into the office and they need an apartment. And you and I, we've been students in the past, we've been, residents in apartments, complexes, and we have our own experience, of a good apartment community or a bad apartment community. And so, we started by thinking, okay, well, if we start to do renovations and we're going to improve those apartments and invest some capital, well, we would rather also control the whole construction aspect of it, like ordering the materials and handling with, contractors and vendors. And so that's how we started the construction side of things. Lately, we started property management because the same thing, we realized the people we were hiring that had the day-to-day interface with the clients and the residents, they were not doing great of a job. They were not taking care of people because they were contractors, they paid and, 5 p.m. they go home. They're not trying to do the extra mile because they really care about the people or they care about the business. And so we started the management company. But I guess answering your question, what we realized is how do we serve the customer the best? How do we make sure they have a great experience working and living with us? And ultimately, how do we surround ourselves with the services where we have some control? Because everything is interconnected. Whether it's maintenance, you have a challenge with your, doorknob or shower heads or toilets or whatever that is, and you call somebody, hey, I need some help. So it's a maintenance crew, or it's the leasing experience at the time of the renewal. Somebody's calling you, helping out with your rent. Or if it's like someone in accounting, you're late on your payments and you need some answers. Or it's the property manager inside the office. Like everything is interconnected. And so for us, instead of having to go through different people and different companies and organizations, we decided like, let's have it all integrated and all kind of like grouped together.
And so providing such different type of services, how do you maintain quality? Because it's very different set of skills per company. So how do you stay good at everything?
Well, it's tough. And I didn't even answer, like, we also recently launched 501c3 because that's ultimately the goal, right? You talk about gratitude and purpose. I thought I came to America as, for the American dream, but it became something much more important than this and achieving, financial success. To me, it was more, how do I become a valuable member of the marketplace and really somebody that can help other people being successful, whether it's my family, whether it's our investors, our residents. And what I realize is, housing and affordable housing, especially in our country, in the US, is such an issue. There's so many people that cannot buy a house because they're going to be renters, for a while because of the discrepancy between, the cost of like paying off a mortgage and then paying on an apartment. And then you have a lot of the population that was struggling. We have the highest credit card delinquency in the country. Since COVID, things have changed. People are hopping from job to jobs, and now you have technology disrupting all of this. And so what I realize is we need to help the community. There's a bigger calling out there with housing and helping people, whether it's qualifying to get housing or helping them during the renewal process with payment plans, and maybe they've lost their job and they need a little bit of a help. So for us, like closing the full circle is also having a foundation that can take care and help some of the people that are more, on the financial edge. But to maintain quality, to me, it comes down to information and communication. And so we've implemented systems and we track data, we run reports, we have AI on a lot of things. I run financial reports, I look at quality, like how many units we're turning every week and how many work orders and all the units we're turning ready. Do we have challenges with payments and collections and all of this? Like it's all about system and access to information. And then it's communication because ultimately we're dealing with people. And so people have to communicate and they have to make sure, when you have a challenge or when there's an issue, how do we make sure we're a team and we all like figuring it out together? So my wife and I were visiting our property, pretty much every week. I mean, I'm going there tomorrow. I'm going to sit down with the maintenance team and we're going to talk about, hey, how can we help? I mean, I'm the owner. I'm quote unquote the boss and I'm management, but I'm also here to figure it out. Like, do you need me to order additional materials? Do you need me to hire somebody? Is there someone in the team that needs additional training? Like, what are the things we can do to help? And I think that's a very different mindset when it comes to quality, to kind of walk down the floor and really help people that are like in the trenches. One, they feel they're cared and loved on. And two, they also understand like, oh my gosh, like the owner is not going to come and just drive his, car in the parking lot and pretend, he cares and then walk away and he doesn't even know my name. No, I'm going to come and spend some time with you because I want to understand what's going on. And that kind of creates some loyalty and also, creates like this sense of like, we're all in the same family, we're not just a business, but like we care for each other.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And Adrien, can you share a bit about the cycle from 2024? That cycle broke. A lot of people who were doing what looked like the right things. You were close to some of that. So what actually happened and what did you see that others didn't or maybe refused to see?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm still trying to understand where we are as a marketplace. We got all into real estate in Dallas, the Sun Belt, back in 2018. And we were like towards the tail end of like what was like a 10-year crazy run all the way to 21. And, COVID hit. And for a period of time, like I remember we bought a property, we couldn't open the leasing office for 5 months. And we had to run tours and applications and everything virtually. And everybody thought like, okay, the world is coming to an end. Occupancy is going to drop to 60%. Consultants, they stopped traveling. Airlines were running, no flights. Everything was hard. Like hotels went from 90% to 20% overnight. I mean, it's like the whole world was disrupted, right? But at the same time, what happened is the government injected so much capital through PPP applications, rent reliefs, what have you, to kind of continue to sustain the economy. And the actually exact opposite happened in 2021. The interest rates went down. We would borrow capital at 2%. And then, the government was pumping additional capital into the economy. And literally, you had this happening, but at the same time in the Sun Belt, because Texas was, quote unquote, a friendly state when it comes to business and COVID in terms of restrictions. Well, we had a lot of people coming from New York and California and other places. So you end up having a demand that is going up. You have access to capital. So it was crazy. It was the gold rush. Everybody was buying projects left and right. And I was underwriting a lot of deals at the time. And I started to kind of see this doesn't make sense. There's a bubble that is about to grow because there's so much inflation and we're just buying projects that used to be, $100,000 an apartment a couple of months ago. Now they're selling for $140,000. And I was like, this is not sustainable. And so we started to kind of see this climb where people were buying, borrowing, buying, and a lot of the borrowing was on a bridge or a floating debt. And so people were like, okay, well, the interest rates are not going to go up that much. Things are going to work out. And it's back to, history repeats itself. What happened in 2008, 2009, the subprimes, those interest rates are not going to be low forever. It's going to create inflation. It's going to create a friction between supply and demand. And I don't want to get too much in details for our, audience on economics. What I saw happening and what I suspected was there's going to be a massive correction. And where we are today, I thought we would be where we are today 3 years ago. And it was not happening. But in 24, 25, and now we're seeing it in 26, people thought eventually the interest rates would go back down. We had a historical hike in interest rates because of inflation. We have a new second term for President Trump. The economy is, also up and down with the stock market. We're in a war in Iran. There's a lot going on. There's the tariffs. And then the 10-year treasury is at a, all-time high. But all of the real estate is also coming to maturity. And so what I'm seeing in the marketplace right now is a lot of foreclosures. You have banks taking back the real estate in the form of REOs. And all of the debt funds that were in formation and all of the borrowers that took all of those deals in 2021, now they're hitting maturity and they cannot refinance those deals or they cannot sell those deals. So there's a lot of equity capital that is just literally being wiped out the marketplace. And so I've seen all of this happening. I'm seeing it happening now, and I'm trying to take advantage of those opportunities, obviously, because I'm an investor and I want to buy some of that real estate. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't really know how to make sense out of it because the economics is all over the place. The interest rates are high. Some of those projects, they're not being well run. The investors have been short on cash. The community has been hurt. Some of the residents, are in situations where they cannot really pay their rent. And so it's really difficult right now to kind of make sense of the economy as an investor and as an operator.
And so now you target distressed assets, right? Receiverships, CMBS workouts, or market deals in market that institutions will ignore. That's a contrarian bet, right? So what makes you confident you're right about where the opportunity is?
Well, I've been following, a lot of the curves and I'm tracking a lot what's going on. And at the same time, I've continued to do consulting with other bigger groups. We've helped the developer selling their platform. And right now we're studying some of those deals that are in receivership, and we're talking to special servicers, trying to understand what's going to happen ultimately with the loan obligations and some of the partnership requirements. We've seen most of our competitors doing capital calls and restructuring deals and, going through a lot of challenges. And we're focused on distress in a sense of not distressed operationally, but distressed from a capital standpoint. If those deals have been over levered and the borrower cannot pay back the note or has a maturity issue and what's called the basis is too high, then there is a massive correction from a capital standpoint. But as far as distressed operationally, we don't want to get into projects where there's crime and city code violations and a building has been burned down. Those are heavy projects. We wouldn't mind doing some of those if there's a partnership in place and, we can get some support from the city, or it's an affordable housing play where we don't have to increase the rent. We can make the numbers work financially, but ultimately the project has to be profitable. And so, we're not one of those aggressive investors that are trying to get in and out. Like, we're more long-term players, and we want to make sure we're not disrupting the community when it comes to like investing in those projects. But at the same time, we're not running a charity. Like, those projects have to be profitable. And so the reason why we're focusing on some of the distress, I mean, that's what I guess everybody's doing right now in some shape or form. But for us, is to come in and trying to, one, protect the community. I mean, some of those communities have been invested by investors are like somewhere in California, and they've never been to Dallas. They don't even know where the project is. They just bought it because they were able to put the capital together, but they're not really good operators. And so we want to, like, we're locally based. We are very, very highly focused here in DFW, and we're buying projects that we think should be, one, better managed. Two, there's a lot of potential there to, protect the community and make sure those projects are run really well. And then over time, there's going to be an appreciation once the market eventually recovers. But those are difficult deals, and they're not just like out there in the open. You have to talk to the lenders, you have to talk to the receivership. Sometimes they're appointed by a court. There's a city code violation. Some residents don't have the hot water. And so it's like, okay, how do I jump in and help? But I don't also want to come in too early, because then I'm going to be accountable for some of those issues. And, there's some groups that are jumping in, trying to take over some projects or partnerships. And there's still a lot of issues, that have to be dealt with. So we're trying to be very meticulous and careful. But right now, that's what we're seeing predominantly in the marketplace.
Adrien, when you and I chatted, I remember you mentioned some famous TV series, some American drama. You like the idea that people follow a story because they care about who's in it, not just what happens next. What does it mean for how you're building your own brand, your business, and your legacy?
Yeah, one thing I realize is, one, it's a small world. And with technology, social media, it's pretty easy to build a good brand and to destroy it. People have quickly access to information. I mean, we've seen instances where, people got caught on camera cheating and other things. And so it's to me, one, it's extremely hard and impossible to control, quote unquote, your narrative and reputation of what others are going to say about you. And it's also very, very hard to recover when you've done something wrong. And so we're all now walking on a fine line where there's a lot of eyes on us and what we do. And it's easy to talk the good talk, but it's really hard to do what you say you're going to do and be consistent about it. And so for us, it's been a lot about building the track record, building the reputation, but also being a man of my word. I've been sitting on a board with a faith-based ministry in the south of Dallas for a number of years. I've mentored people that had issues with incarceration and addiction. Once you start to put yourself out there and be accountable, whether it's to your investors, to your kids, to your wife, there's things that you cannot do anymore. There's things that you cannot say anymore. And so, the way I'm seeing this is, in the marketplace, you have to be very much self-aware. But at the same time, what happened to me is, I don't have a Facebook account. I don't have an Instagram account. I'm not that much on LinkedIn. I'm not posting at all. I don't tell the world, hey, this is what I'm doing on the weekend, and those are all the great things that I know. And so, but at the same time, it's been deserving a little bit my business and my organization. As we're trying to grow, as we're trying to scale, as we're trying to hire people, as we're trying to grow on the capital side, the world needs to know, maybe not the world, but at least there's some people out there that need to know who Adrien is and what he's doing, and maybe being part of this journey in some capacity. And so I've spent some time recently, and you're the first kind of example of this opportunity, but I'm trying to be more intentional, but also more minded about how to build a brand, how to be more present on social media and use some of those tools to build relationships with people that I care for, but at the same time, not be too confident, arrogant, egoistic, and kind of fall in the trap of like, hey, I got to build this image of myself. I'm successful and I'm this and I'm that, because I think you fall in the trap of lying to yourself and lying to the audience. I want to be very genuine about who I am. I don't have all the answers. I try to stay humble. I might be successful in some capacity, but I have so much to learn. And I'm not the best father or the best husband in the world, but at least I'm trying hard. And so I'm at a point where I I think I took a lot of punches recently in the last couple of years, and I've learned a lot of things. And at the same time, I'm like, well, it would be a loss if I cannot transfer that knowledge and experience to other people out there to avoid them making the same mistakes that I did. And so I think I have the duty to my kids and to other entrepreneurs out there, people that are in France that would like to come to the US, people that are thinking about getting into the real estate industry. There's a lot of people that I can look back and say, hey, maybe I can help you out, or maybe I can, look at what you're working on and give you some advice. And that's where I am right now in my life is I want to give back. I want to be more involved in the community. I want to spend more time with people. And as I continue to kind of climb up the American dream, I want to make sure I'm leaving some legacy behind me because, I can be gone tomorrow.
Absolutely. That sounds like you're in a super exciting phase. And Adrien, you founded Kingdom Works Ministry, a faith-based nonprofit focused on affordable housing. So most real estate operators keep their faith separate from their business, and you're building them together. What does that look like in practice, and why do you think it matters?
So, the calling, and I've been leading this Bible study for months, and I'm involved in like different walks with people that have been struggling, like mostly with addiction and other things. And I've studied the 12 steps, and I've studied the biblical scripture. I'm enrolled in DTS. It's a seminary program here in Dallas. My goal is not to become a pastor or form a church, but as you read through and you realize what happened in your life and all the blessings that I've received, I'm now commended. I mean, it's in the scripture. It's in, Matthew 27 or 28. The Great Commission is to make disciples. It's to share the good news and trying to be the hope, the light, and the salt, for others that are, I guess, in the dark or, worried and wondering, what's going to happen next. And that interior peace and confidence is contagious. And so I'm in a really good place right now where I feel I can, be an encourager and provide some hope and tell others, come on, let's go. It's not that hard. You got to believe in yourself. And I see it with my own kids, So the Kingdom Works Ministry, that's something God put on my heart. It was kind of like, hey, I'm going to help you navigate those waters, but I'm going to need you at the end to turn around and help and really getting more involved into the community. So we're working right now with our residents when it comes to financial situations they're having challenges with. I'm doing some Bible study in our properties to help. I mean, some people are not necessarily Christian, and I respect that. I'm not out there to just, enforce Jesus on everyone, but it's an invitation. If you're in a situation and you need some help or someone needs to open some doors, I want to be that person forefront to kind of provide that opportunity. And so I'm in the process right now. There's right in front of our apartments, there's a juvenile detention center. And I'm going to go there and support the chaplain and help some of those kids that are in a tough situations. And maybe all I can do is just, be out there and help or, listen to their story, understand where they're coming from, and figure out that most of the time we have a lot in common. We all maybe come from a broken family or dysfunctional family. We all have some weight on our heart, things that we've been, unhappy with in our own life. And I think, if we all come together and talk a little bit about our challenges in life and other things, and not in a hatred way like we can do on social media to try to prove everybody wrong, but more in a loving and kind and careful way, I think the world will just be a better place. And that's kind of like my ideal. It's a little bit dream. It's idealistic or I guess naive, but that's what I've experienced myself in my life. I was in a dark place, and instead of turning around and starting to drink and starting to make the wrong decisions, I got on my knees and I prayed really, really hard, and God answered some of those prayers. And that's how I started to walk and be more obedient and careful with what I was doing. And now I want to turn back and I want to help other people because the scripture, learning more about the Bible, and the teaching of the Christ as a character. You're talking about character. That's what matters to me. I mean, at the end of the day, people are not going to remember how many deals I closed, how much money I put in the bank account, how many books did I wrote, how many podcasts did I did. Like, they're going to remember, like, hey, who was Adrien? He was a good father, he was a good husband, and he was a good member of the church. And those are the things that really matters to me, is really what is all about the character and the heart.
Beautiful said. And I don't think it's naive. I think it's one beautiful and very much inspiring. So I want to pivot to our Frenchness. For somebody who's watching this from France, maybe an engineer, maybe a finance professional who is thinking or contemplating, toying with the idea of making the move, What's the one thing you wish you'd known that no one tells you before you move to the US?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we talk about Frenchness, it's funny, but I always think about, dans l'émission qu'on a en France, Les Grosses Têtes, and you see Sylvester Stallone that always call us les fromages qui puent, and that makes me laugh. But in my early years, I had many friends that were really close to go to the US or go to Canada. And I have friends that are from France that ended up living in Montreal because I guess it's easier with the language. But, as I've been traveling around the world and experienced different culture, and I spent some time in South America and in Asia, what I found is, one, French people were not really good speaking English, unfortunately. We have a very thick accent. It's really hard to understand. And people from other countries in Europe are much better and more proficient in talking and writing English than we are. So I would say, when I was at school, I took English as a first language, then I took Spanish. But I was doing immersion. I went to the US when I was 14 years old. I spent 1 month in the UK with a family. I was very diligent. I had to figure it out. But what I realized is when I was looking for a job in Toronto, my first month, my English was maybe good and average, but conducting myself in an interview for an hour, my brain would just blow up. I would want to cry and I would be exhausted. I was I'm so unprepared. Business school help you and you do a little bit of internships here and there, but I think to me is really, you got to control it. You got to master the language. You got to be in a situation where you can pitch, you can do an interview, you can do a phone call, you can do a sale, whatever it is, you got to be in a situation where you can survive with your English, right? But the other thing to me is, again, it's back to jumping off the plane. You're never going to have all the answers. You're never going to have the perfect, hey, I have this visa, I have this job, I have this apartment, I have this school for my kids. And it's easy to say because I got transferred, I guess, from Canada to the US as an expat. And yes, I had a house. And yes, they were paying for the school for my kids. But I didn't have all the answers. And so I think, if you do some of your homework and you know which industry you want to work on, and you reach out and you do some interviews and then you figure out the immigration because you're going to become an immigration attorney anyway, no matter what. I think if you check those boxes, at some point, you just got to go and try it out. Even if it's on a 3 or 6 months visa, whatever the situation is, just go try it out, build those relationships. And then eventually, it works, great. It doesn't work, you come back. And you're going to have a better experience and opportunity, and then you try again. But I think some people, they see living in a different country as a conceptual, great idea, but they never really build the plan, or they never really take it seriously, hey, let's go, let's try it out. Because I think it's scary. There's a little bit this mentality hey, if it doesn't work, well, if it doesn't work, go back home and work, in your There's a lot of companies that offer this opportunity, a 1-year sabbatical, whether it's to go overseas or create your own company. So I think if it becomes a dream, and more than a dream, if it becomes a family goal and purpose, I think you're going to find a way to make it happen. But I would really encourage people in France, you don't have to go to the US. You can start by going into, go to Spain or go to the UK or go to Ireland, I have a friend, he lives in the UK for years now. He works for an IT company. And I can tell you his English wasn't that great, but he figured it out and he went out there and now he lives in the UK. He's very happy over there. I'm not encouraging people to leave France and tell everybody you got to go. France is a great country. I love France. It's just, I think the opportunities were limited. And I quickly realized, if I want to live the life that I want to live, I'm going to have to go somewhere else.
I'm with you. This is how I felt as well. And I definitely remember my first job coming here where I had to be a real estate agent and speaking in English all the time. And this type of job, you will eat what you kill. But I also realized, whoa, I'm in competition with New Yorkers, and with my broken English, I'm I will just mimic everything that they're saying. So I was exposed and I learned. When you need to survive, you're going to learn fast. You're going to learn English good. And so, yep. Adrien, can you share with the audience where you see yourself in 5 years and what's in the future for your company?
Yeah, we're, I guess, at the beginning, but we're going to grow exponentially. And I want to become a platform where I can attract capital from overseas, investors in Europe, that want to have a foot in the US, understanding the capital markets and the real estate markets, but also want to be a platform where I can hire people from overseas, give them an international experience. I want to grow our portfolio, be more involved into the community, have the foundation fully rolled out and help, and also get donations, participates with churches and maybe missionaries helping out the community. And then, I think probably more trips back and forth with Europe and France, back in the giving back, maybe going and speaking in one of the MBA school and share a little bit about my background, encourage people. I want them to see the opportunities and feel, if it worked for me, like a guy from Po, spending his weekend in Osogor or in Spain and speaking an average English, I think a lot of people can be successful out there, and they have more resources than I do. But I see myself in 5 years, be more involved in the community, writing books, doing podcasts, continuing to be more intentional, and then really going out there where life is hard. I talk about the detention center. I've been visiting a couple of prisons as well here in Texas. I know there's people struggling with whether it's addiction or divorce or alcoholism or having challenges with their own kids. And so wherever those challenges are, I think if I can go and help and be of a service, whether it's financially or a resource with the church or whatever that is, I want to be in a place where I can look back and say, it's in Matthew 24, like being a good and faithful servant. At the end of the day, I think God gave me those skills and this time on earth for a purpose. And if I can be fruitful and multiply and help others out there to be more successful, maybe it's also doing venture capital, helping another entrepreneur to start his own company, providing coaching with marketing and accounting, whatever those things are. I want to be in a place where I can serve and I have the ability to really go out there and provide some support to other people that are trying to achieve kind of like the same, I guess, American dream.
I love that. And this is my last question. What's the one thing you know now that you wish the 25-year-old version of you about to leave France had understood?
I will go back to having a relationship with the Christ. I thought I was by myself. I thought I was on my own. There's this expression like self-made, whatever. And I think it's foolish. I didn't want to listen to him. I didn't want to have a relationship with him. I was very stubborn. I was very me, myself, my own ego. And there's been places in my life where I ended up, in a hotel room on my own, getting on my knees, crying, wondering what the world is going to do, what's going to happen to me, not being up to whatever standards, and really wondering, is this worth, this dream, right? What is this American dream that is pretty much a nightmare, right? And it's impossible. I'm not going to figure it out, the immigration, my wife, the bills, the kids. And I got in those places where eventually I started to ask questions and pray and talk to him and say, I can't do this by myself. Like I'm not a superhero. I need the Christ. I need you to come in my life and make things much better and change things and change me. And I'm telling you, when I experienced this, and there's been many instances in my life where I know he's been holding me by my hand and kind of guiding me and showing me and telling me, trust me. It's overwhelming. And so I was not educated and proficient in religion when I was a kid. And, I guess I went to school and then I went to church. But to me, Catholicism was more of a, hey, you have to do those confessions and all of this. And it was not something too appealing to me. And I was immature. But as I grew and I realized I'm on my own, I figured out that actually I wasn't on my own all along the way. And it's overwhelming to realize now, like the way I've been raising my kids, the quality of my marriage, my relationship with people in the office, my work, all of the fruits that I'm bearing. There's a verse in John 15:6, it says, abide in me and I abide in you, but apart from me, you can do nothing. And I'm a believer that there's nothing I can do in this world if it's not for the Christ. Everything else would be foolish if I think it's the product of my own, intellect or capital. I think at the end of the day, I'm part of a bigger purpose. And I wish I knew who the Christ was and I could turn to him early on in my life, because I think I would have had better answers than trying to figure things out on my own.
Beautiful. Adrien, it was a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show today. Where can people find you?
I hope they'll find me in heaven one day, playing golf or something. But no, I'm here in Dallas. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm trying to be more active, posting and putting myself out there and building a brand. But I would really encourage people, whatever it is, if they're, inspired or whatever emotional state they get after this podcast, and if they want to engage more with you, with me, talk a little bit more about, what we do, or maybe having another follow-up, conversation, they can reach out to me. My email, is adrien@capitalboutique.com. They can reach out to you through the podcast, and I'm out there and I'm always, willing to engage.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adrien.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
And that wraps up today's episode on Parlez-Vous CEO and our special commercial real estate series. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I can't wait to join you again next week. Thanks for listening to Parlez-Vous CEO today. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review. It helps us keep going. And connect with us on Instagram @Parlez-Vous CEO. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I know some days are harder than others. On those tough days, think back to why you started. What you're doing today matters, even when you can't see the results yet. Ideas are great, but it's what you do with them that counts. Find everything we talked about today at parlezvousceo.com. See you next week, and you've got this.